Okay, on this video we're going to learn a little bit more about the short answer interpretation question from the Advanced Placement American History exam. Let me first give an overview of what I'm going to cover in this PowerPoint or in this presentation. I want to give an explanation of the question, discuss an active approach to the question, things that you can actively do before you start writing to help you develop your answer. And also then we're going to review sample answers so you can see that perfect 3 score that you're trying to get. First of all, let's talk about what this question is about, what the interpretation question asks you to do. It asks you to basically tell the meaning or interpret passages or images. Sometimes you'll be given to political cartoons. And your mission is to compare those two, and the question will usually ask you to tell similarities or differences, and then also to tell the meaning. Then it will ask you to support what you're saying, the claims that you're making, with specific evidence, some historical information to support the interpretation that you're making. So as we go forward, we're going to keep those things in mind. We're going to compare, and we're going to interpret, and we're going to support. Those are your 3 skills that you're going to be using. This is an actual sample question from AP Central website, and it is, as you can see, it has the ABC format as all short answer questions do. It's going to ask you about a significant difference in Part A between Adams' understanding and the other writer named Rush's understanding of the American Revolution. It's then going to ask you in the B and C part to support those interpretations. So first of all, you're asked to compare, and that's from skill 2. That's one of the skills from the American History exam that they want to see you be able to do. They want you to develop an argument and support it with evidence as you interpret what these 2 writers are saying. Okay, let's look at the passages, the 2 passages. And for the purposes of time, I'm not going to read these passages out loud. You can pause this presentation and do so. But I want to review with you an active way of reading, a form of annotation and underlining to help you get as much as you can and use your time wisely on the test. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you read these, pay attention to names, dates, and events. Underline those things. This should activate any knowledge that you have about the person or the period or the event in history. Think of events during that time that support the meanings that are being given by these 2 men. Think about what they're saying, and think about the events in history that actually support what they're saying. So let's look at an example of that active reading process. Okay, you see on these passages that I have gone ahead and underlined some of those dates, some of the names of things, some of the names of the people, and some of the events, some of the documents you see there. These are all things that I would be underlining as I'm reading the passages. And then I would begin to try to activate information about these events. What else is going on in history during this time? When John Adams speaks about the war and about things happening between 1760 and 1775 before the first battle, what kinds of things is he talking about? And also then Benjamin Rush, he's going to refer to the Declaration of Independence and making new forms of government. What kinds of things can we remember that were happening as far as the United States trying to set up those new forms of government? Okay, I've gone forward then from that point after I do my underlining and I'm thinking, then I would list down some of this information that is coming into my mind as I'm reading. For instance, taxes, Boston events, and acts of parliament that happened between 1760 and 1775. Those types of events are the events John Adams is referring to. Then down here, where Mr. Rush talks about forming a government, he's talking about work left to do to put the revolutionary ideas in government, and you should be thinking about the Articles of Confederation, writing the Constitution, writing the Bill of Rights. Then, deciding on the meaning. Let's look back at these passages again and write down a short statement, a jot note, as it were. Jot down a note about what you think the passage means, which I have done here to the left, regarding John Adams' meaning. He says the war is not really part of the revolution, that the revolution had occurred before the war actually began, even before the first battle. Benjamin Rush, however, contradicts. Remember, we're looking for the difference. He contradicts that, and he says the revolution, the real revolution, has to happen after the war, when we try to set up this government to put all our ideals in place. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears for a minute, and we're going to look at this is the scoring guide that you can see how the points are awarded. And in order to get all 3 of your points, you would need to accomplish all 3 tasks set forth by the A, B, and C. If I were a grader or a reader on the AP exam, I would be provided these scoring notes to help me score those short answer questions. So you can take some time and pause the video and look through some of this information. And this is the type of information that I was referring to a minute ago as you're reading and you're jotting down the meaning in Part A. And then you're jotting down these events that occur during these time periods that are mentioned by John Adams and Benjamin Rush. Now let's look at some samples. Let's look at some actual student writings. The first sample is a score of a 3, and I wanted to put the rubric, the scoring rubric, next to the actual writing so that you could look at them together instead of having to go back and forth. So this student achieved all 3 points, and you can see the explanation for the reader. The reader says that the writer in the first paragraph easily tells both writers' meanings, explains those fully. Then in the Part B, in the second paragraph, the evidence is used to support Adams' viewpoint, and the writer talks specifically about the Boston Tea Party and the effects that it had on the people of Boston, and said in their minds that they wanted to rebel even before the actual war began. Then Part C, again, the writer achieved the 1 point by talking about in the third paragraph the struggles to set up that government as shown in the Articles of Confederation. Now, this writer could have gone in a little more detail, talked about Shays' Rebellion and how it affected the rewriting of the then Articles of Confederation. However, the writer was not penalized for that, and because the writer mentioned the Articles of Confederation and talked about how that the U.S. still had to create a stable government and law of the land, the person achieved the points. This is our second example, and this writer only achieved a score of a 1. You can see in Part A that the writer struggles to get the meaning out, and in fact, there's only 1 sentence here to state that meaning, and it doesn't explain very well what the meaning actually is. So one of the things that the readers are looking for is that you go beyond a restatement of the quote, that you explain the author's meaning fully, and usually this requires more than 1 sentence. Part B, you can see that the writer seems to get out of the time period mentioning the Civil War, so this writer did not earn any points for Part B. And then Part C, the writer did earn 1 point by referring to the evidence of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as evidence of how the United States still had to put the ideals of the Revolution in place. Finally, this is our last example. You'll see this writer scored a 2. And in the first part of the answer, the writer scored the 1 point by correctly explaining the differences in the interpretations. You can see that in the first part. You can then see the writer will earn a point for Adams' explanation or for Adams' interpretation. It says that although the response was not well structured, it earns a point for explaining how the Declaration of Independence and American identity occurred before the Battle of Lexington. And you can see that in the middle of the answer. However, Part C, the writer didn't earn any points because there is no support for Rush's point of view. The use of troops to support that point is not adequate. So be careful. You can't just use any type of support. The support has to actually relate and provide evidence to the actual viewpoint. So be careful of that. So in summary, I hope that this video helps you review how to answer the question using an active process. To remember that you are making a comparison, that you are giving interpretation or meaning. Be sure that you underline and you annotate getting ready to answer. Be sure you activate your knowledge of the era. Provide enough explanation of the meaning, and be sure that you support that explanation with your strong examples. Thanks for viewing.